But after that professor, who, by the way, was from the Middle East, he took me aside and he insisted on knowing how to pronounce my name and saying it correctly. I sort of paused and I asked myself, like, look, who am I? Am I here to be accepted by people? Am I not already accepted by them? Or is it something about me? Am I the one holding myself back from being accepted by people around me?
We too often ask the question, do I belong here? Do I fit in? And we spend too much time and energy trying to fit in or trying to figure that out. But I think the path to comfort with yourself and with whatever community you happen to be in is asking the question, what is my responsibility?
I used to think that belonging was a other people problem, but I understand now that belonging is a me problem.
If you live outside of India, then you might have faced this question of belonging. The beliefs, the way of life, the practices that you live can be at some points quite different than the people around you. The practices, the way of life, the way they look, the way they dress, their conduct can be quite different. And there's a really interesting tension here in the middle. Do you belong with the way that you are? Or do you have to give that up in order to belong to this other place? I think this is a question that a lot of people across the globe who are of Indian origin face. And we have to find a dharmic answer to this. That's what this upcoming episode is all about. And this is especially important for me and my co-host Kashyap because we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. And in America, we live two different identities. We have a very Hindu, Indic background. And on the other hand, we live in an American society, a very westernized society. So how do you actually balance this tension? And can these two tensions coexist? Is there even a tension at all? In this episode, we're going to look at a dharmic perspective on how to reconcile this tension and actually find a way of harmoniously blending them together. My name is Dhawal, and I'm going to be joined by my co-host Kashyap as we discuss this topic. Let's dive into it.
So I was an undergrad, and it was in my last year of college, actually, where a professor took me aside and he asked me, hey, Dhawal, how do you actually pronounce your name? Because for most of my life, ever since I moved to Canada, the way that I would go is, just call me by my last name. My last name is Tank, T-A-N-K. Call me Tank. You don't have to call me by my first name because people would inevitably butcher my name. Instead of Dhawal, they would say the ball, devil in many cases, which I'm definitely not. And I think the first couple of times I kind of went with it. And then I just got too embarrassed. I would just tell them that actually don't even attempt to pronounce it right. Just call me Tank. But after that professor, who, by the way, was from the Middle East, he took me aside and he insisted on knowing how to pronounce my name and saying it correctly. I sort of paused and I asked myself, like, look, who am I? Am I here to be accepted by people? Am I not already accepted by them? Or is it something about me? Am I the one holding myself back from being accepted by people around me? And all of these questions are sort of going on in my head. And I finally owned up to the fact that my name was Dhawal. And ever since then, I asked and I insisted on people to pronounce my name correctly and refer to me by who I actually am. I think everyone has this story of wanting to maybe hide aspects of their identity or trying to subvert it in some way or just trying to present yourself differently than who you actually are. What's it been like for you growing up in America? I think you grew up in the 80s and 90s. What was it like for you or maybe for the people around you?
This discussion of identity is actually really important. And it's only later in life that I really better understood it. Everyone carries an identity, and this is something that we label ourselves with and society labels us with. And quite often our identity becomes our purpose. When I was younger, being one of the few Indians growing up in Alabama, probably the only Indian in my school, the only Hindu in my school, it was very easy to feel different. It was very easy to feel like the other, not because of malice, but just because I was different. I was a vegetarian. I was a Hindu, and every other kid would talk about going to church on Sunday, and I would go to mandir, to temple. I did puja every morning. I did tilak chandna every morning, and I would wear it to school. And quite often, teachers and students and everybody else were curious about it. Once again, not out of malice or spite, but just because it was different and it was weird. And I remember for several years when I was younger, it was something um, I was embarrassed by. I remember once very distinctly, we lived in an apartment complex and there was a plumbing issue, and the maintenance man had come over and he was working in the bathroom, and it was time to do arti, which is the ceremonial lighting of the diva in front of the sacred images of the murtis. And my mom said, let's go and start arti, and I'll join you. And I remember being so embarrassed that I was going to sing the arti with the bell, and the maintenance worker was going to hear me singing this arti. And I remember very, very clearly singing it so softly because I was embarrassed by it. And it was only later in life that I came to terms with this and realized that, you know, this Hindu identity is not something I necessarily needed to suppress or be ashamed of just because it was different. It was something I needed to embrace. Um, Growing up in America as a first generation immigrant, as a Hindu, um, is not a unique experience to me. I think there are people all over the world that have migrated, that have left their native homes and native lands and traveled. So this is not a unique experience. And I think we share many similarities, uh, through our lives, with this experience. Um, but I think it gives us a very specific lens to look at identity, because there has been such a clash. Now, everyone carries an identity, like I said before, and this is something that, from a societal perspective or an anthropologic perspective, everybody identifies with their family, with their last name, with their religion, with their nation, with their village, with their tribe, even with their generation. And everyone thinks that this identity crisis or this identity clash is unique to me, is unique to me. Um, but the older I've gotten, I've come to take a step back from that and try to integrate all of these different identities. What am I? I'm an American. I'm an Indian. I'm a Hindu. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a citizen of the world. Which one is more important? Is there a ranking of these different identities? And how do I reconcile potential conflicts in these identities? And when others see me, what do they identify me as? I've had many patients through the years as a physician ask me, when I say I'm going on vacation, ask me if I'm going home. It's a very specific question. If I'm going home. Now, my home is Atlanta, Georgia. But I think they automatically assume that if I am going on vacation, that means I'm going to India. Now, mind you, I could be going to South America. I could be going to Africa. I could be going to Europe. I could be going to Arizona and see the Grand Canyon. But it's amazing how people will default based upon my appearance, based upon my name, that, hey, if I'm traveling, if I'm going home, then obviously I should be going to India. I don't know if you've had any similar experiences to that.
I'm a product of someone who's grown up in 3 different places. I spent a little bit of my childhood in India. Then I grew up in Canada. I spent a lot of my time there. And now I live in the United States. And something that I really appreciated about Canada and now America is this sense of acceptance. And I think people look at a blip in history and they panic. They start to think that they don't belong. But if you look at the long arc of history, you look at the long arc of, let's say, America. America is at its 250th anniversary. The founding of America was give me people from all over the globe. 250 years ago, bringing people from all over the globe, bring them here, and we will make something incredible happen out of it. And there's a reason why, whatever is happening currently is just a blip in it. But over 250 years, America has become a prosperous nation. It's become a place where people from different parts of the world can truly belong, where people have found abundance, where people have found belonging, where people have found friendship and community and a sense of engagement. And all those things come not from a false sense of pride that I am the best, but from this real humility. I think it takes humility to say that I want to be the best. I want to create a great place. And to do that, I have to take what's good from everywhere. And I really found that to be incredible about growing up in Canada and now America, that I've found a place that looks at everything around, that accepts people from across the globe. And it says, what is the best thing about you? And then it says, let's welcome that in. Let's bring that in. Share that with me. Share that with everyone else. I mean, I think if we had to celebrate America 250, that is what's worth celebrating. This idea that let's look at the best in people and share that with me. And by the way, what's the best thing about the different multitudes, the different identities that I carry? Let me share that with other people. I think that is how you celebrate living in a country of such abundance.
Okay. So, what you're talking about, Double, brings to mind a Latin phrase. That's the basis of American government, e pluribus unum. It's Latin and it essentially means from many become one. So many people create one nation. And my experience living in America, this has been true for the most part. Now, in the edges, there are always factions and there are always extremes. But, when my kids were in elementary school and high school, when I would go to their sporting events or their musical events or performances, I was always amazed to look up at the stage and see so many races, so many ethnicities, so many religions represented, all under a single banner of this is this school, this is this high school in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm not saying it's unique just to America, but I don't think we pause long enough to appreciate these kinds of experiences. So that's the first point of appreciation that I have in terms of this idea of American democracy and the diversity it encourages and allows to prosper and come together. But to your point about our true identities, another interpretation can be flipped out, that e pluribus unum can be flipped on its head from in one person contains many identities, right? I am an American. I am a Hindu. I'm a professional. I'm a father. I'm a son. All of those things are true. And the beauty of Hinduism is you don't have to rank them. The beauty of America at its best, from my experience, is that it's unbelievably pluralism exists here by design. If you look at the way the government was set up or the way the Constitution was written, in many ways, it doesn't limit diversity. You can be whatever you are. Now, mind you, everyone has different lived experiences, but I'm speaking to my lived experiences. But within Hinduism, you have a system of beliefs and faith that doesn't necessarily require us to rank our different identities. And I think that connection between the two is very powerful.
Kashyap, I think the challenge of seeing all these lofty ideals that you see in, American democracy, e pluribus unum, you see this idea in Hinduism, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The challenge is to actually live it. And I know for a fact that I talk to a lot of people that they don't necessarily feel like they belong in the place that they live in. They are, these are diaspora Indians, diaspora Hindus that have some roots in Hinduism. They have some Dharmic ideals that they've grown up with, but they live in these different countries. They live in America. And well, for the most part, it's a very positive experience. I think for many people, they might sense a sense of otherness. And I'm trying to figure out, what is the resolution to that? How do you feel like you belong? How do you feel that the place that you're at is your home? Even when you're so far away, is it something to do with personal responsibility? Will there always be a sense of being the other in these different countries? I don't know if you, what are your thoughts on that?
I think every generation has a tendency of feeling sorry for themselves. They think that the world is really hard, that no one has experienced the challenges that they're experiencing today. And I don't want to discount any challenges, real challenges that people may be facing. But I think we're very fortunate. I think we have to acknowledge that. I think the world that we live in can be a scary, dangerous place, but I don't think it's nearly as scary or as dangerous as it used to be. I hope that most of our listeners are not worrying about where their next meal is coming from or whether they're going to have a roof over their head when they sleep at night. I'm sure there are places in this world or previous generations where that was a challenge. Um, our kids worry about getting into an elite university, while there are others that are worried about getting an education at all. Um, so I think when we think about identity, I think we need to have a little bit of perspective that the opportunity to worry about my identity and whether I fit in really is a privilege that millions and billions before us probably didn't have the time or the energy to necessarily think about, because so many other basic needs needed to be met or weren't being met. And that provides a certain level of solace as well as gratitude. And it helps reframe kind of our thoughts about identity, and perhaps diminishes the angst or the anger that we may feel when we have to deal with these issues. We too often ask the question, do I belong here? Do I fit in? And we spend too much time and energy trying to fit in or trying to figure that out. But I think the path to comfort with yourself and with whatever community you happen to be in is asking the question, what is my responsibility? Yogiji Maharaj, one of our gurus, he used to have this wonderful saying, and I think we've mentioned it before on this podcast. He said, Maru e saru ne, but je saru em che e maru je. And essentially, that means not just thinking that what is mine is good, but rather what is good belongs to me. And I think that sentiment is very powerful. It's very Hindu. The idea that virtue isn't national, truth isn't owned, wisdom isn't ethnic. It's something for me to learn. And there's so much we can learn and appreciate from others if we just take a step back. It doesn't matter whether I'm in India, whether I'm in America, Canada, Japan, Africa. And quite honestly, this sentiment from Yogiji Maharaj really is the antidote to so much tribalism that exists today.
I think what you brought up is pretty interesting. We often think of the Hindu identity as rooted in a specific geography. Like you belong to India because you are Hindu. But Hinduism is a global religion. It's a global way of life. It belongs to the entire world. And by that logic, if we truly understand that, then you can be anywhere in the world and you can belong and you can be a Hindu. I think this tension right now that many of us are facing and feeling is this sense of you feel like the other because you think you belong somewhere else. But you belong where you are. You belong in America. You belong in Canada. You belong in wherever you are, provided that you follow the dharma of the land, right? And that is such a foundational aspect of spiritual practice. I know Swami Maharaj is often said to be a civically minded and civically engaged citizen of the country and the community and the neighborhood, the province, the state that you're in, because it really does matter. It's not just politics. It's not just showing off. It's not just trying to look good, not just trying to fit in. It is a core part of your dharma. If you do that, then you are practicing and you are living out your Hindu identity, but you're also living out the identity of the land that you are living in. I think this question of belonging is very fraught because it makes you assume that you are the other. But if you act like you belong, because you do belong, go out there and vote when it's time to vote. Go out there and call your representative when it's time to do that. Go out there and volunteer for that civic organization that you think is doing something worthwhile, not as a way of showing that you belong, but because you do, because it is your home, because it is your neighborhood, because it does matter. Don't litter, not because you're trying to look good, but because that is what a good citizen does. Talk to someone who looks different than you. Again, not because you want to be included, but because that's what good citizenry is. That is what dharma is. If you just focus on the privileges, if you're just focusing on maximizing your own, then you will be considered the other as well. But it's only when you increase your circle of sum, as Manse Maharaj says, it's when you increase your circle of belonging, when you include others into your circle, that's when you can start belonging. So Manse Maharaj is just saying that, increase your circle of sum. I used to think that belonging was a other people problem, but I understand now that belonging is a me problem. It's a question of me looking at my neighborhood, looking at my state, looking at my country and saying, you know what? No, I care about these things. I'm going to be engaged. And that's what makes me American.
Yeah.
That's what makes me Hindu. That's what makes me who I am.
No, I like it. I mean, I think that was very well stated. And I appreciate the passion. Kind of wrapping this up and coming to a conclusion, today it's all about self-expression and identity, especially. This is who I am and respect my identity. But from a Dharmic perspective, it's a different question. Because I am a son, what do I owe my parents? Because I'm a Hindu, what do I owe society? Because I'm an American, what do I owe my country? And this shifts the idea of identity from something that we claim to something that we live. And we're coming up here to the 250th celebration of the founding of America. And this conversation specifically about Dharma, Seva, citizenship, it feels very practical rather than abstract when you think about the history of just America. But I'm sure everyone living in their own countries can feel the same way. So I don't have to choose between being an American, Indian, Hindu, or anything else. The challenge for me isn't choosing one identity, it's living each one well, while remembering that my deepest identity is beyond them all. And because of that understanding, I'll be able to live every single one of my identities, fulfill every one of my responsibilities without any kind of identity crisis or clash.